There is a story in the Bible that makes millions of people uncomfortable. I'm sure you know the story. King David, a man after God's own heart, commits adultery with Bathsheba. As if that is not enough, he kills Bathsheba's husband, Uriah. Then God tells David, "You shall not die. However, the child who is born to you shall surely die." Instead of God punishing David and Bathsheba, he punishes the baby who was born from this affair. And for thousands of years, people have been asking this harsh and uncomfortable question: why would God punish an innocent child for his parents' sin? There are three viewpoints that try to answer this question, but only one is correct. I will tell you which one after analyzing them one by one. Let's begin with the traditional view. This viewpoint belongs to those who argue that by killing David and Bathsheba's child, God was punishing David, not the child. They argue that from God's perspective, he was not punishing the child, he was punishing David. According to this school of thought, the baby was the arrow that pierced the king's heart. David's grief was so intense that his servants feared he may do some harm. David did not want the child to die, as he pleaded with God for the child and spent nights lying on sackcloth. The question is, why did God not just kill David directly instead of killing the child? And according to this viewpoint, God's intention in taking the infant's life was to punish David. They argue that the child was gathered up into the arms of God, just as all innocent kids, which according to them is not a bad thing, that at the end of the day, the kid went to heaven. They add that if this child had grown to reject God like his siblings, then his early death was his salvation. They say this because some of David's children ended up in rebellion, such as Amnon, David's eldest son, who raped his sister Tamar; Absalom, who staged a coup against his own father, slept with his father's concubines, and killed Amnon, his brother, as well as Adonijah, who attempted to seize David's throne. This viewpoint admits that the death of any child should hurt and appall us. However, they insist that it can indeed be right when ordained by God. So, from this angle, a child's death that is ordained by God is not bad. Do I agree with this? I don't know. Let's look at the second school of thought, the legal perspective. Now, the legal perspective shifts focus from theology to the law of Moses. The law of Moses commands that the man who commits adultery with another man's wife shall surely be put to death. So, the question is, why was David not stoned to death despite sleeping with another man's wife? The answer from a legal point of view is that David was not executed because Mosaic regulations specifically stated that a person could be executed only if there were two or more witnesses to the crime. Whoever is deserving of death shall be put to death on the testimony of two or three witnesses. He shall not be put to death on the testimony of one witness. And in the case of David and Bathsheba, we do not find that even one eyewitness was present to verify the adultery. Nathan was not a witness because he knew this by divine revelation. There is no record of his having been at the scene of the crime. And even if he counts as an eyewitness, one more eyewitness was needed for David and Bathsheba to be stoned to death. So it is evident from this point of view that God never ignored his law while dealing with David. He simply worked within the law. Now let's look at the last school of thought, the God permitted, not caused perspective. This view draws a sharp line between what God does and what he allows. It responds to those who argue that God killing the child and not David is a specific targeting of an individual child as punishment for the sins of their father. The God permitted, not caused school of thought argues that the Bible often speaks in the language of permission, not action. That sometimes the Bible presents things as God doing something, when in fact it means that God permitted something to happen in his providence. For instance, We all know that Saul committed suicide. Yet the Bible says, "But he did not inquire of the Lord. Therefore he killed him and turned the kingdom over to David, the son of Jesse." According to this verse, God is the one who killed Saul and handed his throne to David, which is not entirely true, because Saul took a sword and fell on it. He literally killed himself. So, according to the God-permitted, not caused viewpoint, when the Bible says that the Lord struck the child that Uriah's wife bore to David, this is anthropomorphic language. We are not told what actually caused the infant's death, only that the infant died and God did not intervene. In other words, this viewpoint holds that God did not kill the child. He simply did not stop the natural outworking of a fallen world. So, which of these three schools of thought better explains what actually happened to David and Bathsheba's child? In my opinion, this should not be a question of which school of thought is right or wrong. I think this story forces us to confront two realities at the same time: judgment and mercy. David deserved death according to the law, but somehow mercy protected him from the punishment he deserved. Do I think the baby deserved to die? Absolutely no, but I somehow think David's child dying was strategic so that another David's son will die centuries later. And unlike the first child who died for his father's sin, Jesus came to die for the sin of the whole world. I know you feel bad that God killed a child for a sin David committed, but imagine that is exactly what God did to Jesus Christ. When it came to saving humanity, he did not spare his own son. He passed the judgment you and I deserved to his own son. That is why I found this story interesting. A story of a God who would rather sacrifice his own son than leave us without mercy. Did you find this story interesting? I'm sure you did. Therefore, subscribe to this channel because I will be bringing you more stories like this one. Stay tuned. I'm Magina and you are awesome.